As painful as it is, we do have to take a second look at just how the hell the 49ers got their ass handed to them so badly in Green Bay yesterday. Plus, where do they go from here? Kyle Shanahan had his conference call, and the words may be ringing a little hollow. I'll let you hear them for yourself on today's Under Review on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. What is good, everybody? Welcome to Under Review on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. He is Vish Kumaran. Vish, you know, there are some days where this job is super fun and we love it. And then there are days like today when the Niners just get absolutely spanked and it's painful to take another look at what went down.
Yeah. I think painful is probably the right word. I think that if you were a watcher of this show for a long time, probably since this offseason, you probably weren't surprised with some of the things you saw. They were examples of things we've discussed throughout the show, weaknesses we've been concerned about with this football team. Everything came into pass yesterday. It was a disaster. Before we get into the drive-by-drive, for me, the one thing, Rob, and we'll get into it because I think there's examples in the drive-by-drive. The one thing that disappointed me was we're talking about a team that's made 4 out of 5 NFC championship games. I thought there would be culture and pride that we would see come out of them yesterday. Now, did I expect them to go into Green Bay yesterday without Bosa, without Trent Williams, without their starting quarterback and win? No, that was not my expectation. But I didn't expect them to lose 38-10 when they looked like they didn't have a lot of fight in them in moments. And for me, I thought a team that's been in 4 out of 5 NFC championship games, Rob, would have that sort of, and you're already getting ready to sip the beer, would have some sort of fight, some sort of pride, just the lasting legacy of having competed at that level and been there. Their season was on the line in some ways yesterday, and they didn't even fight for it.
Remember Kyle Shanahan?
We were pissed off from yesterday.
Yeah, this was supposed to be them pissed off. And then they went into Green Bay and ran 3 plays in the first quarter. Like we've done the drive-by-drive recap of the first quarter. It was 3 plays.
Well, there's 2 things, right? And in the first 2 drives for me, Rob, that are indicative of everything that happens in the game. Number 1, if you're familiar with this show, I don't get a lot of things right, but I have a good grasp on the 49ers secondary. I tell you when there's guys that aren't that good, even if other people tell you they're good. Isaiah Oliver, Jair Brown. And I also tell you when they sign a guy into Sean Gibson, I think they're seeing something. Jair Brown misses 3 clear tackles in this first drive. He misses one on the Tucker Kraft touchdown, and then twice he has Josh Jacobs on a misdirection play dead to rights in the alley. Yes, it's a 6-yard gain. It's a good game, but you got to come down and make the tackle. He has no confidence breaking down ball carriers in space. It is an issue for this football team. That's why Tashawn Gibson has been brought to the active roster. He plays out of control. I feel like the game's moving a little too fast for him around him still. He was a player I liked in college. I didn't like his rookie season too much, and he didn't play well early in this game. I thought it set a bad tone for them. The 49ers struggled to tackle as a team, but Jair Brown individually set that tone on this drive with 3 of them.
If you're watching the stream right now, you could see the Packers' first touchdown. I mean, Jair Brown has Tucker Kraft lined up, like ready to go put a big stick on him, and like he barely even grazes his shoulder.
He runs in out of control, man.
Yeah, that's not a good look. Yeah, I had high hopes for Jair Brown when he came in last year. You know, I thought he made some good plays. I was encouraged. He hasn't taken that next step, you know, in 2024, unfortunately, as frustrating as it can be.
Mustafa looks good, though.
Yes, Mustafa looks very good. But, like, this was the frustrating thing. It's one thing for us to make our prognostications, like, that's fine. But when we were all dead on, everybody was saying coming into this game, the Packers are going to run the ball down the 49ers' throat. And how did the Packers start out? Running the ball right down the 49ers' throat. I think they passed on the first play of the game, and then they were like, what the hell are we doing? And then they just ran it. And, you know, they asked Nick Sorensen about it, and he always says, well, we got to coach it better. We got to execute it better. It's like, dude, that's not an answer. Like, they just can't do it. They don't have the guys to stop the run, and they're going to get run all over the rest of the season.
So they don't have the guys. That's one thing. They don't tackle well. That's another thing. Nick Sorensen, Johnny Dell has posted a couple of nice videos of Nick Sorensen talking about how he wants these guys to tackle and how he's not worried as much about certain looks on missed tackles and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
interesting conversation. Shout out to him for posting it. But really, when you look at it, they also make mistakes, man. There's multiple times in this game that Fred Warner and Devondre Campbell fill the same gap, and they run into the same offensive lineman, and Josh Jacobs goes whoop-de-doop out the other side. And okay, you make a mistake, the guy gets an 8-yard gain. Now you turn it into an 18-yard gain because Jair Brown can't come down and make the tackle at 10 yards. And so there is, for me, Rob, starting this game, like we can harp on it. The theme of the first drive is every drive Green Bay scores, it's going to be the same talking points. Yeah, they couldn't stop the run. Yes, they didn't capitalize when Green Bay made mistakes, all of those things. But the biggest issue for me is where is the pride, Rob? Where is the pride? This is a football team that has made 4 out of 5 NFC championship games. Green Bay is supposed to be their little brother. And they're walking into Lambeau, and on the first drive, Rob, it felt like already the Niners were rattled. They were out of sorts, and they were supposed to be coming into this game. Again, I understand with everything that went down yesterday, they are still very much alive, and we're going to talk about that throughout this show, I'm sure. But going into yesterday, they had a feeling of their season was on the line when they kicked off in Lambeau. And this first drive, the defense did not play like a defense that, holy crap, if we lose this game and we have Brandon Allen playing at quarterback, like what's going to happen? Fred Warner, if it's a primetime game, I'm sure he's going to play great. I'm sure he's going to talk about it on his podcast. I'm sure 9 different people in the media that he's friends with are going to call him an all-pro. But gosh, we've been talking about it as 49ers fans in moments last year when Dre Greenlaw didn't play. The stretch of games that they lost last year, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Fred Warner was awful. Last year versus Arizona, late in the season, Fred Warner was bad. The last couple of games, he has not played that well. And they need him to elevate and give a certain level of leadership and set the tone for this younger defense to follow him. And he's not doing that. And the way Josh Jacobs ran over them in the first quarter, I'll say this, because I watched Patrick Willis's whole career. I watched Navarro Bowman's whole career. I never saw a running back run on them if they were leading a defense the way Fred Warner got run on yesterday with Josh Jacobs. And we talk about him when he plays great. This was a moment where he had to step up, and he's not played well the last couple games, and he really didn't play well yesterday too.
But see, you're touching on something that I feel like is the bigger overall thing, and I'm guilty of it this year too, so I'm not just trying to call you out. We keep acting like the Niners have this ability to summon up and play like they did last year, right? You call it pride, call it whatever you want. They don't. It's just not there. That's the thing. Like when you're past your prime, you reach down and you dig deep to bring that out, that dark animal, whatever you want to call it, to bring it out and summon it up one last time to rise to your circumstance. They can't. It's not there. They reach for it. It's not there. They're just not at that level anymore.
So I disagree because I feel like that animal exists, but you have to build that animal up over the course of the season, Rob. Like last year, Christian McCaffrey was practicing hard in May, for Christ's sakes. There were articles about how hard he was going in training camp. This offseason, this team was not locked in from any portion of it, right? There was no portion of this offseason where they felt like if Brett Davis nails it, they're mentally tired. Absolutely. You want to touch on the 49ers first drive? Because I have a huge problem with the first play of the game.
Oh, the shovel pass to George Kittle? They got a first down on that.
I have a huge problem with it.
Dazzle me.
Yeah. So what happened with the play? No problem, right? You're right. They got 9 yards out of it, right? Not a bad result. For me, the issue is this is the first play on the road for not a very good backup quarterback against the 7-3 Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. And your first play call is a 7-step drop from under center that turns into a broken play that he shovels to the tight end. Now it gets 9 yards, but you're not building confidence in your offense right off the bat as a play caller. And I know he gets criticized for the under center 7-step drop that's naked. JT O'Sullivan hates it. I don't actually mind it. The 49ers run effective pass plays from this. But for me, like, what are you doing in terms of instilling confidence in your backup quarterback that he's running through a broken pocket and shoveling out to the tight end? Like, For me, that's not on the road. Again, like, there's no rhythm. It's not a handing it off. It's not back foot hits the ground in the offense. There's a rhythm and timing. We're getting going. We're getting Brandon Allen going. For me, this is problematic, Rob. I haven't heard anybody criticize it, but again, this is indicative of how they walked into this game. They weren't prepared. If this was a prepared 49ers team, you're coming into Lambeau, no left tackle, offensive line has been struggling. Let's get the run game going. Let's establish it right away. Okay, we can't run it. Let's establish play action. Let's get the ball to Kittle right away. Instead, you have a 7-step drop that turns into a kind of broken play that he shovels to the tight end. I hate that. I hate that. It's a bad start.
I don't care if it's a 7-step drop. Everyone's like, oh, 7-step drop. Why? Because JT O'Sullivan says it's bad. And I love JT O'Sullivan. But like, nobody complained about a 7-step drop until they started watching JT O'Sullivan's videos. It's fine, man. I had no problem with it. To me, I was glad they didn't just come in and run it, like predictable, scared to put the ball in your quarterback's hands. I was fine with it. I think
I have an issue with the 7-step drop because he has to hold the ball, Rob, on the first play of the game on the road. Why does he have to hold the ball? And he's climbing through a back pocket. The guy fumbled on the third play of this game. There was no confidence built in him.
I mean, they ran 3 plays in the first quarter. That's what sucks your confidence out.
Why can't the first play be screen to McCaffrey? Something quick, get the ball out of his hands. But there's no confidence built from the play. Get the ball out of his hands. The offense moves.
You don't think he got confidence from, oh my God, this play didn't go as planned. I stepped up and made a play to George Kittle. We got a first down.
No, because the next play, look at how they looked. Look at how they looked in the first half. Everything looked out of sorts. The way they ran the ball looked out of sorts. The way the offense looked was out of sorts. And to me, the first play is indicative of an offense that's going to be out of sorts.
I mean, I can't. It's not like they ran a double reverse. They did a 7-step drop. There was pressure. The guy stepped up and dumped it off. It's fine.
Okay. To you, it's fine. For me, it was an issue. That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, but Brandon Allen throwing a 3-yard pass in the flat. Oh, now his confidence is going to be so much higher. Like, I disagree. But anyway,
I never said his confidence would be higher, Rob. Now you're changing the argument. I said that you can build his confidence by getting the ball out of his hands quickly, having a play that has rhythm, timing within the structure of the offense. They did that later on. They started throwing those timing out routes. That's when he started getting some confidence and playing better and getting the ball out of his hands.
I think what bit them in this one is that it was, and Brandon Allen admitted this after the game. He said, it took me a while to kind of get back into the flow. Because remember, he hadn't played in a real speed game in like 3 years. And so the plays that he was going to need to get back into the flow, because they couldn't sustain any offense, didn't really happen until about halfway through the second quarter. That's when he sort of kind of shook it off and was able to get into the flow of the game.
So that's my point. And that first play that you said, oh, it doesn't matter about his confidence, that doesn't get him into the flow of the game. It's a 7-step drop. It's a broken play. He shovels it out to Kittle. It doesn't get him feeling in the timing and rhythm of the offense.
But that's not the problem. The problem is
that is the problem. He said that. He said he wasn't in flow.
The problem is what happened after that, because it's 2nd and 1. And what happens? Dominic Puni, false start. Poor Dominic Puni. He hadn't had a single rough day last year. Yesterday was a rough day for poor Dom. And now he's, by the way, had an MRI, and we're waiting to hear back. So that's obviously terrifying news. But Dominic Puni gets the false start. From 2nd and 1, it goes to 2nd and 6. They try to run it with McCaffrey. And now you go from 2nd and 1 to 3rd and 5, which 3rd and 5 is not like insurmountable, but it's certainly a hell of a lot less fun than 3rd and 1, or potentially not getting to 3rd down and all. Brandon Allen drops back. He gets sacked, fumbles the ball. Now, luckily, they didn't turn it over, but that was the end of that possession. And little did we know that was the end of the 49ers offense in quarter number 1.
Yeah, and they got pressure right over the center, an extra rusher right over the center, and Jake Brendel, he couldn't get his hands up on Rashawn Gary fast enough.
Jake Brendel is having a hideous year. He is so brutal this year. And I think they were begging John Feliciano to try and come back because they wanted to replace him. And unfortunately, he's not going to be able to come back. He's going to remain on IR. Today was the last day they had to activate him. Kyle Shanahan said on his conference call, it's not happening. He actually tweeted like, hey, I've done everything I can to try and come back, but just didn't respond. So we're stuck with Brendel. And he's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, he's a problem. But again, I think this is where personnel on this team in certain spots, they cut certain cost corners to pay other players. And
Mhm.
you need a center like Jake Brendel. If you value a center, draft a center. If you value a center, pay a center. But they didn't have either of those options because they've spent money and resources elsewhere. And to me, that's the bigger issue with this football team. It's Shanahan isn't exactly consistent with his utilization of resources.
They used to pay big money for a center. They paid
Right.
Weston Richburg big money. They went out and got Alex Mack, like someone a veteran who had played in the league and specifically played for Kyle Shanahan for a lot of years. And then Jake Brendel happened. And look, they got to the Super Bowl last year. They led the league in rushing last year. This year, it's been quite a different story. Meanwhile, the Packers get the ball back. They go right down the field, 12 plays, 71 yards. They stick it in the end zone. And what sticks out to me, Vish, is something that we've seen all year. This defense cannot get off the field on third down. The Packers converted a 3rd and 5. They got 10 yards. A 3rd and 10. They got 13 yards. No problem. Any big time, there was no pressure on Jordan Love. He just dropped back right over the middle of the field. First down, drive continues. It's frustrating.
And then they had the huge play to Romeo Doubs on third down as well on the drive.
Right. That was the 3rd and 10 where they got 15. And it's frustrating that this defense could play well enough to set up the 3rd and long. And then I just have no confidence in them to make the actual stop and get off the field. I'm always pleasantly surprised when it happens.
Yeah. Kenny Powers nails it, right? First, the 12 guys on the field 2 times. Again, that was a team that's not prepared to play, in my opinion. For it to happen and then for it to happen consecutively on the next play, that is problematic. And I know Shanahan was irate about it happening the first time. Well, that's a moment where you got to be in control and make sure it doesn't happen again, because it's not a good look when you're yelling and it happens exactly again in front of you. It's pretty embarrassing.
The first time, according to Kyle, he said the Packers subbed late and the refs didn't allow the Niners to sub, which they're supposed to do.
Right, which is what he was yelling about.
Right. And then so he was like, the first one, the refs kind of screwed us, essentially. The second one was on them. And that's
right. But the second one happened consecutively after the first one when he's shown yelling. Not a good look. Not a good look for you being the leader, and that's your football team. The other one for me, and the other issue is the third down thing that you brought up. It's just they're going to have a third cornerback problem going into this offseason again. Green is a starter. Diamador Lenore is a starter for sure. Isaac Yadam, Rock Ya-Sin, it's not great. Mooney Ward's going to leave this offseason. They need to draft another corner, and it should be another second, third round corner, right? We've seen it. These 5th round corners, Darrell Luter, these Sam Womack, it doesn't work. You got to go invest in getting a corner in the 2nd round, the way you got Renardo Green. They have to put that sort of investment in it again. They need a third corner. In the modern NFL, you want to be able to play man coverage on third down. Anytime the Niners try and play man coverage, that third corner gets picked on almost guaranteed. In this game, they picked on Renardo Green a decent amount as well, in zone and in man. But Yadam also got his fair share of licks. And, I mean, the most hideous play for Yadam was a Christian Watson drop with 30 seconds in the half. Why are you getting run by on a straight go ball? Like, how is that happening?
It's like the only thing you can't do in that scenario. And, of course, it happened. Thank God that Christian Watson
That's just playing low IQ situational football. And that's indicative of this team, Rob. They're an undisciplined, bad execution team. And that's not a well-coached football team. That's not what we would call a well-coached football team. And that's not what Kyle Shanahan has usually brought.
You remember the 97-yard touchdown against the Vikings? Right? Similar stuff. Daza 0187 says Packers won 3 games with a backup quarterback. Why can't Kyle Shanahan? I mean, he didn't win Sunday, but I saw Kyle Shanahan win 10 straight games with his backup quarterback in 2022 and get all the way to the NFC Championship game in 2022 with backup quarterbacks. Are we forgetting that is a thing?
What I don't like about this conversation is the people that frustrate me are the people that can't analyze what happened on Sunday individually and use Sunday as confirmation biases for years of incorrect narratives. And I'm not saying Daza is that person, but there have been people who have had years of incorrect things that they have said about Kyle Shanahan, stacking them. And then on Sunday, when he has a bad performance, which even me, as someone who's defended him, someone who supported him, would tell you, yeah, he had a terrible performance on Sunday. They use that as confirmation bias for, see, that's what I told you. No, we're not going to go back and rewrite Kyle Shanahan's history of success and what he's accomplished because he did poorly on Sunday. We're going to evaluate the fact that he did poorly on Sunday and evaluate him moving forward. But I'm so sick of this idea that we're going to go rewrite the fact that this is a coach who did something very few coaches do. He turned around pathetic. This organization was pathetic in every front. They had no talent. They had no way of selling tickets. They had a shitty new stadium. They had an owner nobody wanted to work with, and he made them relevant on every account and restored their glory days. That's a special coach to me. We're not going to rewrite him doing all of that because he's been performing not so well this season, and he was awful on Sunday.
And yeah, let's act like he's got to win the Super Bowl every year. Like, the only reason anybody has any expectations for this team is Kyle. It's true. It is. He's the only reason.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But you want to fire him a year after he makes the Super Bowl. Like, I don't even want to have that conversation. Let's get to the 49ers.
Daza says Jim Harbaugh didn't do that. Go look at the 49ers the 2 preceding years to Jim Harbaugh, and then go look at them the 2 preceding years to Kyle Shanahan.
And by the way, Kyle's done everything Jim Harbaugh has done and made another Super Bowl. So, and by the way, was anybody saying that Jim Harbaugh should be fired when he got fired? Hell no. No 49er fan was saying Jim Harbaugh should be fired. Yeah, we're going to fire.
And for me, it's not Jim Harbaugh versus Kyle. To me, Jim Harbaugh is an example of why Kyle accomplished something even better, because Jim Harbaugh, this owner, was so bad that he fired Jim Harbaugh. Like, that's the guy Kyle has accomplished what Jim Harbaugh accomplished with. That owner, the guy who was stupid enough to fire Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, it's just this. If you want to fire him, you just want blood. You're just mad and you want blood, and I get it. Like, I'm mad too, but I also feel like this year is not the year to do it. If next year goes like this, then we can talk about it. But let's cross that bridge when we get to it. The one good drive the Niners had, Fish, all day came in the second quarter. 11 plays, 65 yards, 5 minutes and 31 seconds. They converted third downs. They had I love what they did on their first third down. It was 3rd and 7, and they had Kittle and McCaffrey. What's that?
Oh, no, go ahead. You were going to explain it.
They had Kittle and McCaffrey out wide on 3rd and 7, and they basically had them bunched up tight together. And Kittle essentially just picks off both guys, and McCaffrey just sort of floats out to the right. And it's the easiest layup throw for Brandon Allen you ever saw in your life. It's the kind of thing Sam Darnold's been doing all year long. McCaffrey catches it 9 yards, first down. And I loved it because it just took like a potentially scary situation and used the 2 most talented guys on offense that the 49ers have, and they made it easy for them.
And I thought it was a great example of, again, when Brandon Allen, when they made things clear and easy and defined for him, he threw the ball pretty well yesterday. Yeah. Like, when he got his back foot to hit the ground and it was available, he was putting it on for the most part. He wasn't hampering them where he was missing easy and wide open throws for the most part. Now, yes, he was hurting them because he's not that big. He's not that athletic. He tends to fumble when guys hit him. He can't really escape and create something. But when you give him the opportunity where he's able to look, clear sight, back foot hits the ground, he was able to make throws in timing and in rhythm. And this drive was an example of they had their offense clicking. They made it easy for him. This is how I would have liked the first drive to look to start the game. Get him going right away. Get it quick, rhythmic, nice and easy. This was a great drive for the 49ers, an example of how things can hopefully look if Brandon Allen has to start on Sunday night versus the Bills.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what he looks like, if they call plays the same way, if he's more comfortable. Now, for the record, Kyle did say that Brock Purdy threw today lightly and had no pain. So obviously that's good. They have a day off tomorrow. We'll see what happens Wednesday. Who knows what's happening with Brock Purdy? More, I feel like, happening than what they are telling us. Like, literally, Kyle, I joined the conference call today because there was a bunch of questions I want to ask, and somebody asked it before I could. I think it might have even been Grant. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But the question was, what is the nature of Brock's injury? Which is that's exactly what I was going to ask. what is the injury? And Kyle said shoulder. And nobody followed up. So
that's the 49ers media for you, Rob. But I feel like we've been here and we've done that. We've been here with Jimmy Garoppolo's ankle when Jimmy thought he was more hurt than the 49ers thought he was. And the way they handled that was bizarre. We've been here with Trey Lance's finger. We've been here with Trey Lance's arm fatigue. We've been here and done that. What happened last week with Brock's shoulder was freaking weird. That doesn't happen where you and your quarterback publicly look like you're not on the same page.
It's dicey. Something more is going on than what they're telling us. Clearly, I think they have not earned the benefit of the doubt at all when it comes to injuries. We'll see what happens with Brock. But like, if Brock's going to go out there,
you got to think about it like this, Rob. Like last week, the first time, because he played poorly versus Seattle, the contract conversation on Monday and Tuesday was being had, right? Like Colin Cowherd had the contract conversation. A few of the other national networks, they talked about him having the contract. Next thing you know, this shoulder arm thing, which they haven't been necessarily making a big deal about, but we've seen him dealing with it over the course of a few games on the sideline, is a thing. And then he can't throw in practice and he comes out and whatever. It's a thing. The guy is going into a massive contract negotiation this offseason. There's a business to all of this. This is not a good place for the 49ers to be.
No, it is not. Daza says the Niners have been lying about injuries all year. Gold Tao says Niners used to cut off fingers to play. Brock's got a, quote, sore shoulder. Mahomes limping to Super Bowl wins. That's the thing, Gold. I don't think it's a sore shoulder. Like,
that pisses me off.
That's not a thing. It's more than that. I would bet all the money in my pockets.
We've already seen this guy try and play when his elbow was torn up in the NFC Championship game. Don't do this to him.
But if Brock is going to be out there, but he's going to pass up guys deeper down the field because he's worried about it, like, I don't want him to play. Like, don't play if that's the case, Brock. I no, that's not good for you and your future, and it's not good for the team in the present. I would much rather see Brandon Allen rather than a Brock Purdy that is afraid to throw the ball down the field.
My question is, the recovery from the elbow last year was so fast, right? And we were surprised by how fast it was. Was it maybe that everything went so fast and now he's got some soreness because they said shoulder, they said elbow soreness? It is weird.
He was playing last season before his arm was 100%. He's admitted it. It wasn't right up until Thanksgiving, he said. I think, and you could dispute it all you want. I think he did not want Trey Lance to ever have even a shot in hell. Reclaim that job. So Brock came back as soon as he was physically able, even if he wasn't all the way ready, and he never gave it up.
I don't even think he had a shot. I think if Brock hadn't come back, the worry was they would have went and got somebody that Brock might have had to compete.
Or maybe they would have given
Kirk O'Chains or something like that. And the other issue was don't forget, they had the greatest thrower in 49ers history in the building. And we're seeing what KOC is doing. KOC is doing with Sam Darnold. I think he would have been more worried about Sam Darnold than Trey Lance. Rob, I don't think there was any chance in hell last year Trey Lance was going to start for the 49ers.
My point was he didn't want to give anybody a shot at that job.
Brock?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
He was like, screw it. I'm able to throw. I'll deal with it later. It's my job. It's my job. It's my job. You can't take it away from me.
He has no choice, though, I feel like. That's more on the 49ers, right? You're driving him into that corner, and he's a 7th-round pick that just earned that opportunity. You don't know when else you're going to walk into training camp as the undisputed starting quarterback of an NFL franchise.
Yep.
Doesn't happen a lot for everybody.
Vinny V says Shanahan thinks he can fix any quarterback. Daniel Jones loading. I want no part of the Daniel Jones project. No, thank you.
I'm in. Put me in.
No, God.
I'm in with Daniel Jones.
Oh, God. Ham GT83 says, is Kyle just trolling, not playing JP Mason and Isaac Guerrero? It is crazy how poor Jordan Mason, all he does when he gets in there is run as hard as he can for as long as he can. And that poor guy cannot stay on the field. And it's not his fault.
Yeah, I mean, their run blocking is really horrible.
Yes, it is.
And I know that like he's been effective on the plays we've seen him run, but it's not exactly indicative of a fair picture because you got to look at their run plays and isolate what they were running into. And yes, Mason runs his ass off, like you said, but you don't look at his run plays and feel like McCaffrey wouldn't have gotten 10 yards on that. And you don't look at McCaffrey's run plays and say, oh, yeah, Jordan Mason is getting 20 yards and Christian McCaffrey just lost 3. Like their run blocking is a total mess. The left guard's an issue. The center's an issue. We know what the right tackle is. Their like run blocking as a system has fallen apart essentially since the Tampa Bay game. The Tampa Bay game was rough. The Seattle game was brutal, and yesterday was brutal.
And usually, Kyle Shanahan's teams get better at run blocking as the year goes along. We've seen that for the past 3 or 4 years. Is like right around midway through the season, all of a sudden they start run blocking in complete lockstep, and they just run over people. And instead, the opposite has happened this year. I'm so glad you said that about McCaffrey and Mason. Yes, I would like to see Mason more, but I don't look at any of the runs McCaffrey had and said Jordan Mason would have done more with that because the run blocking is bad. Johnny Dales has the breakdown. I've rewatched all the film on the game. It's just bad. Brendel, there was one counter play where Jake Brendel literally, not only does he not block the guy, he gets thrown to the ground directly into the path of Christian McCaffrey. Like he is losing. It's like if I was out there trying to block, that's how bad he's losing. And it's crippling this ground game. And when the ground game doesn't function, the pass game can't function.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest issue with the 49ers offense in general. They're talking about Mason, Andre Garibay is talking about in the comments that Mason was doing better with that same crappy line. It's not just the line. They're blocking poorly since essentially McCaffrey comes back. Like you can see a line of demarcation in the 49ers season where the run blocking has gotten markedly worse, especially between the left guard and the center, essentially for the course of since the bye was there. And then the other part of it, Rob, is this offense flat out just doesn't work when they're unable to get the run game going. And like, that's the deeper issue. Like we can say, oh, it would have looked a certain way with this quarterback, with this player, with this. And yes, it looks a lot better with Brock Purdy because he's way better than Brandon Allen. But the offense is only so good with Brock Purdy if you're not able to run the ball either. And that's the bigger issue for the 49ers. They don't fundamentally do the things that the 49ers did well in their peak. What did the 49ers do well in their peak? They ran the football well, they rushed the quarterback well, and they had a dominant front seven. Which one of those things exists on the 49ers today?
None. Sadly. Andre, I do want to say, like, yes, Mason was doing better earlier in the season. I think they were run blocking better early in the season for one. Like, so everyone says, oh, they put Jordan Mason in for that big play and he had the 16-yard gain or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, because that's the one play out of like the whole game where the line actually did their job and he was able to gain yards. Like, I don't think it's that Christian McCaffrey is so bad that if you put Jordan Mason in and change nothing else, they'd be able to run the ball. So I was glad you said that.
Yeah, it's a weird way of talking about it because I get it. Like the 2 runs we get to see Mason, he's still kicking butt. But go back and watch that run and tell me which one of McCaffrey's runs Mason is going to change the result of.
Right. That's exactly.
We've seen Mason have difficult runs when the blocking is not great this year as well.
So the Niners drive down the field, and I just got to give love to one of like 2 guys that played well yesterday. George Kittle is so freaking good, man. He's so good. There's nobody to worry about except George Kittle in the red zone for the 49ers this year. And he makes the touchdown catch. He gets wide ass open in the back of the end zone. Brandon Allen rips a ball nice and high, and George Kittle comes down and makes the catch and scores the touchdown. And all of a sudden, it's like there's a glimmer of hope just because 85 is so damn good, Vish. He's the only one of their stars that has played like a star this year.
Oh, yeah. He's such a stud. He's such a warrior. He had a couple of just amazing catches, too, in this game. Brandon Allen threw him some actual dots.
Yeah, the back shoulder later in the game.
Yeah. Woo. He is the example, Rob, of what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. Like, George Kittle was a veteran who put his pride on the line and put everything out. Like this, he played like the season was on the line. Did Deebo Samuel play like that? No. And that to me is the problem, honestly, with the 49ers. And that's where, like, for me, the first possession on offense and defense were huge indicators of the rest of the football game, because this team didn't come out and play or was prepared as if they were playing a game with their season on the line on the road versus Green Bay. It felt like they had already made their bed and they were okay with the turnout of the season before they even snapped the ball. And Kittle was one of the few players who seemed like he was going to go down fighting. Him, McCaffrey, Juwan Jennings, a
But
couple others.
that's what I mean. Like, I don't think that they actively were like, yeah, I could play harder, but I'm not going to. I think that this is all they had to give. That's what I think.
I don't mean it in terms of playing harder, Rob. I don't think that they're actively not like giving their best. It is in terms of like when they're competing. I don't think that their heart's in it the same way. And I think there's a difference in that. I don't think they're getting motivation to come and play this game anymore because they've played in so many meaningful games and they feel a little bit burnt out. I think they look like a team that's cooked. And again, if you watch this show this offseason, this was a worry that we discussed, and we talked about how this team should reload right now, right after the Super Bowl. That was when the reload should happen, and we're seeing the results of that.
They tried to squeeze one more year out of it, and it just wasn't there. The juice had already been squeezing.
Yeah, it's squeezed because it's like what you said is, I think, brings a lot of great nuance to the point, because I don't think Deebo in his mind is like, I'm only going 80%. I think Deebo is still giving 100%. But like you said, the 100% he has to give is so much less. And I think that's also defined not just by his physical dissipation, but also his surroundings. Deebo doesn't seem motivated to play in games that don't matter. Deebo doesn't seem motivated to compete in plays that he's not getting the ball. The compete level of Deebo has gone from here to here, and that's indicative of this entire football team. Their competitive threshold used to be very, very high. They used to have some of the best competitors on the field on any given play. Those competitors' compete level has come way down. And Deebo, I don't think Deebo wants to get hit like that anymore. I don't think Deebo wants to hit people like that anymore.
Well, we'll talk about it when we get there. But first, we mentioned it briefly. Isaac Adam gets cooked right before the half. Thank God he drops the ball. And all of a sudden, the Niners go into halftime with a glimmer of a chance of hope, because they're getting the ball first. And God, they put Deebo back on that kick return, and he busts through the line, and he goes down to the 10-yard line. And that was the only time in this game where I believed, like, holy crap, they might actually pull this off. Because I didn't think Jordan Love was particularly good in this game at all. He didn't look particularly sharp to me. If that play had stood, Vish, and the Niners get down to the 10-yard line, now maybe they score a touchdown, maybe they don't, I don't know. But that would have been a one-score game. They would have made it a one-score game, and then who knows what happens. Maybe the defense actually holds on to one of the interceptions that was in their hands that night. But that penalty on Saubert, which I think was a bogus call, and the Niners had plenty of penalties that were their fault. I didn't think that was a penalty on Eric Saubert at all.
I don't know. I feel like anytime the guy wraps his arm around and gets the inside of the other side of the guy's pad, they almost always call it. You don't really coach. Nobody teaches the guy to block like that. So to me, again, it's like another example of this team is just slightly a bit undisciplined. And then I agree with you on the momentum thing. This felt like their one shot, one moment. Green Bay more or less sleptwalked with the lead. They kept making mistake after mistake. They didn't take the 49ers seriously. They played like a C+ game, a D game, and they walked out with the 38-10 win because the 49ers wanted to win even less than Green Bay wanted to win in this game. Once Green Bay went up 10-0, 17-0, they were sleepwalking, making mistake after mistake, like you said, and the 49ers would ruin every opportunity they had to put pressure on them. And that starts with this drive, right? Going down, Kyle Shanahan finally does something aggressive, goes for it on 4th and 2. I thought they had a chance to Christian McCaffrey on this play. I thought this was really Brandon Allen's one egregious mistake. He was late on the throw.
He was late. It's there. If Brock is there, if Brock is quarterback, that's a first down, because Brock is throwing that with anticipation and timing, and he hits McCaffrey. But Brandon Allen didn't quite look at Christian first. He was looking somewhere else, and by the time he got back to him, it was just that little tiny bit off, and it falls incomplete. I love that Kyle went for the first down. I think that was absolutely the right play, Who cares, that you can get the field goal, go for the first down. You don't know if you're going to ever get down there again. I liked it. But here's the thing, and this is the point I want to make about the defense, because the defense has had their problems this year, but now we're at the point in the game where the defense does enough to give them a chance to potentially get back in it, right? They turn it over on downs. Then, first of all, Renardo Green drops an interception. This was the first
like a lob. This is a lollipop. He puts no pace on this ball. He just turns around and it hits him in the hands and he drops it.
I mean, I was stunned that he dropped it. And now the Niners forced a punt, but obviously an interception at midfield basically puts the Niners right back where they were.
It's a quick 3 and out, though, right? For the fact that the 49ers just had this huge adrenaline dump coming out of the half, where they get this huge momentum-changing play from one of their star players who's essentially underperformed the entire year. They've been waiting for a moment like this from him, and they finally get it. It gets called back. Then they go down the field. They have a decent drive, their second decent one. The first time they're able to string multiple sets of first downs together other than their scoring possession, and it gets ruined on the 4th and 2. For going through that and still being able to come back and get such a quick 3 and out, it was a great stop for this defense, especially for this defense, which we think is average and without Nick Bosa isn't very good.
Yep, it was a huge, massive stop. And early in the year, I felt like they were at least getting those turnovers. They were turning teams over early in the year. I felt like they haven't forced a lot of turnovers lately. And so whatever. Okay, Niners defense makes the stop. San Francisco gets the ball back again with a chance to make it a 1-score game. And then they start moving down the field. McCaffrey for 9. McCaffrey converts short yardage for the first down. Then they hit George Kittle. Brandon Allen rips a seam ball right down and Kittle catches it. And again, he's off to the races like a drunken rhino, 31 yards. And all of a sudden you're at the Green Bay 47 and you're like, here we go. We're in business again. And then what happens? The run game completely lets them down. 1st and 10, McCaffrey to the left for 2. 2nd and 8, McCaffrey to the left for nothing. 3rd and 8, Brandon Allen drops back to pass, rips a ball into a tiny window that hits Deebo Samuel in the hands, and Deebo gives you the for who, for what effort, goes right through his hands, ball's intercepted, returned to the San Francisco 26-yard line, and the game basically was over after that.
He didn't want to get hit. That's what this was about.
He turns his body in the air to avoid the hit.
And this sucks because you got the quarterback who makes the league minimum, and he stands big in the pocket on the road on 3rd and 8, which takes a lot of courage, and he stands there and makes an absolute rip. And your $23 million receiver, like, what is that? What is that? And for me, that's indicative again, Rob, and I've been using that word a lot because I think these are a lot of small plays that represent the bigger picture, which is problematic with the 49ers. But again, this can't be the effort and hunger that you get from one of your team captains and star players at this point. And I've been a long defender of Deebo Samuel. I think in his time, he was a very good player. I think that time has come to an end, and we're seeing it play out, and it looks ugly a little bit on the field right now.
What do you mean his time? He had 1 good year.
2 years. He was good as a rookie, too.
He was okay. It's not like he was
like
good as a rookie. He was doing a thing that nobody had done. Look at this. This is Brandon Allen ripping the ball. It's right there, Vish. It's a great throw from Brandon Allen. On a 3rd and 8, he puts it on him, and it goes right through his hands. And I feel like with so many turnovers the 49ers have had this year, not only do they turn it over, it's never like an arm punt. It's always turnover, right setting up the other team's offense to score a touchdown. Now, I know the Niners could have held the Packers to a field goal, but they don't have that kind of defense this year. They had the kind of defense this year that needed the offense to help them out a little bit. And the 49ers offense not only refuses to help them out, they continually put them in bad situations. 3 plays, 26 yards, Packers get the touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 24-7. And you're just like,
but that's the problem, right? We do this all the time with this football team. Offense, defense, offense, defense. Good teams support each other. When the defense makes a good play, the offense takes the momentum. The offense isn't always going to be the best. The defense isn't always going to be the best. It's how you play complementary football to win the game. Your defense gave you an opportunity with the ball back in this game, you kind of took the momentum out of it. You waved the white flag when they then, we're like, we're waving the white flag, and that was that to the football game. Like, again, like you said, they're not that good where they're just going to keep stopping them like the 2000 Ravens and keep giving the 49ers offense opportunity after opportunity. You have to capitalize in the moments of the football game. You're already the worst team. You're on the road. Green Bay is evidently a lot more talented than you on both lines of scrimmages. You're overmatched in a lot of areas, and then you're hurting yourself too. You're not making plays when they're available. You're not intercepting the ball when the quarterback is throwing lollipops to you. This is bad, Rob.
They have hurt themselves all year long. Cynthia says, did players on this team get paid and unmotivated? Some, like I think Deebo got his bag, and to me, he has not been the same guy.
There's too many podcasts on this team, Rob.
Right. Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel has a podcast. Eric Armstead had a podcast when he was here. Lots of pods. George Kittle never saw a camera he didn't like. There's a lot of that. You know,
Kyle Juszczyk has reminded everybody he took a pay cut.
Right. You know, it's weird. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but they almost had the same kind of stuff that comes along when you do win a Super Bowl. And I've said this a lot of the time. Dealing with success is a thing. It's different from dealing with adversity and defeat and failure, but dealing with success is a skill. The Chiefs are excellent at dealing with success. Clearly, they know how to do it, right? Patrick Mahomes does his commercials, but he's not doing 50,000 podcasts. You don't see everybody on that team with their own podcast, with their own thing, National Defensive Lineman Day or any of that stuff. They know how to keep the main thing. And the 49ers didn't.
Well, and we talked about it, right, this offseason. We mentioned it with the head coach. For me, I felt like they were getting too much credit for a team that didn't accomplish the thing. And I thought they felt themselves a little bit too much because of that.
And they always did. They were always, you had the perfect term for it, the uncrowned champion. They have always acted like it. Well, we didn't win, but we should have won, right? We didn't win, but, well, Brock Purdy got hurt and we ran out of quarterbacks. And, you know, we didn't win, but we're the best team, but we didn't win. It was never, even this year, Fred Warner, what did he say going into the game? We're an outstanding team, but we just haven't finished. No, you're not. You're not an outstanding team. You're a mid team. They never acknowledged that the house was on fire, Vish.
And they haven't done that in the past. And it's been kind of the resolve of this team that they remain hopelessly optimistic and united through really awkward situations like Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, like really weird situations with like what went on with Jimmy G's ankle, odd situations where it seems like the coach and the quarterback don't necessarily get along. Like they go through these strings of dramatic off seasons that don't necessarily happen for teams that have been as successful as the 49ers, and then they play really well together. But also, I think we've reached a point, Rob, where that hopeless optimism that was once a confidence is now a delusion. And that's where, like, Shanahan's supposed to be known to cut through the reality. But if we're being honest, the 49ers have never seen reality of themselves. They've always thought themselves to be different from what they actually are. And what they actually are is a team that's blown it year after year. They thought themselves as a team that got screwed. Fate screwed them. Destiny, that was the issue. If, fate chose to happen like this, then they would have won. And I think that's been their issue. And right now, again, this is where it comes back to me. The issue with this team is not the head coach, it's the team builder. The team builder needs to take a good look at this roster and cut through the reality. It needs to be blown up and it needs to be re-put together. I know you love Deebo Samuel. Time to pat him on the back and wave him goodbye. I know you love some of these.
Sorry, you said it needs to be blown up, so I blew it up.
Oh, thank you. I know we love Kyle Juszczyk, and I know he marketed us really well by making the Pro Bowl every year with no competition. He's got to go. So, examples, they have to make the tough roster decisions. And again, Mike Shanahan, if you go look at his tenure in Denver, what ultimately failed him? Like, this was a guy in 2006. He went to the freaking AFC Championship game with Jake Plummer. It's like Kyle going to the NFC Championship game with Jimmy. He beat Brady and Belichick at home 27-10 in 2006. Who beats Brady and Belichick by 2 scores in the playoffs? And Mike Shanahan did that with Jake Plummer. What was the issue? He was never able to reload the roster. Mike Shanahan, the team builder, the GM, got in the way of everything because he didn't have a logical sense of how to distribute the money, the finances, all of that. That's the trouble the 49ers are running into with Kyle. Kyle's irresponsible. He's erratic. We see that in his game decision-making in games, right? There's no logic to how Shanahan thinks in games. There's never a logic. It never makes sense. He just does how he feels, and that's how he runs the football team. They need to help him a little bit. They need to bring somebody. They need to bring a sense of organization, Rob. I think that's the issue. He's not seeing it with this team. He didn't see it this year. Leonard Floyd was not the solution in the defensive line. Malik Collins wasn't the solution. He didn't see it. We talked about this in the offseason.
I think Leonard Floyd's been better the last few weeks. I think he got hurt in the preseason, and I think he's just now coming around to getting to a spot where he's relatively healthy. I'm not saying he was a world beater. He had 2 sacks yesterday, and they weren't like Drake.
He sacks the quarterback the way Drake Jackson used to, where when the quarterback runs off, someone else moves him off the spot. If someone else gets pressure, Leonard Floyd, I almost called him Leonard Jackson, can disengage and run him down and sack the quarterback.
Yeah, but that's okay.
It's okay. When they don't put pressure consistently.
When Nick Bosa's there, it would have been just fine. The problem was Nick Bosa wasn't there, so there was really nobody else to get pressure. Look, it's exhausting talking about this team. It really is. Look, there's more possessions in the game. I mean, the Niners went down and got a field goal, and then
the rest
Niners
of the game is just depressing, dude.
Well, here's the problem that annoys me, though, right? Like, Niners go down and get a field goal, then they force a 3-and-out again. So again, the defense has given this team the ball back with a chance to make it a 1-score game. Unfortunately, the 49ers go 3 plays and lose a yard. The defense
on the field goal too. Is that the drive that Eric Saubert just falls down on 3rd down? He runs his route 2 yards below the sticks and looks completely unathletic.
Down. Yep. He's had a rough couple of weeks.
You're telling me this team can't draft one decently athletic tight end in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and have developed him behind George Kittle? Like, Eric Saubert isn't an NFL player for me. I'm sorry.
Vinny V says Drake Jackson ghosts catching strays. Well done, Vinny. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, they have not been able to find a good tight end for years. They've tried the draft. They've tried free agency. They have whiffed every single time. They had the ghost of Jordan Reed out there, for God's sakes.
He was the best one they had, right, Rob?
It's like that Mr. Burns take from The Simpsons when he falls off the horse and he's like, oh, we did 100 takes and that was the best one. Like, yeah, that's what the Niners are doing with tight ends. This is the best they can do. This is an organization that had Delaney Walker as a backup tight end at one point, right? Like, guy leaves the Niners and makes Pro Bowls like year after year in the AFC. He was the backup tight end. Now they can't find another tight end
who does anything. They don't block or receive.
That's the crazy part, is like they can't even find a guy that just does one thing well. And Saubert was short of the
These aren't even role players, right, Rob? Like, I'm not saying they need to have, like you mentioned, Delaney Walker as their backup tight end. I'm saying just have a guy who can fulfill a role. And Saubert doesn't fulfill a role in run blocking. He's awful. He's a bad pass blocker. He's a bad route runner. He falls down when you try to throw him the football. Like, he's not providing any advantage to your football team. You can't go 12 personnel.
Brian Smith says there aren't many good all-around tight ends in the league, to be fair. It's an underused position. Just find a guy that doesn't suck at everything. How about that? Like, can we aim for that, please?
And it doesn't have to be like, if you value this position, which they do, they've been trying to find this guy for a couple years. They went after Brock Wright and all of that. It doesn't have to be that you go get the street. Like, that's not, if you value the position, then don't go street shopping for the position. Say, okay, Brandon Ayuk, you're going to demand this. We're not going to play Kumbaya. We're not going to play footsie with you the entire offseason. We're going to be a smart organization. We're going to let you walk. We're going to take money. We're going to get a freaking backup tight end. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Instead, you play footsie with him the entire offseason and then pay him exactly what he wanted. What was the point of footsie?
They never win the negotiations, ever. The ones that they win are the ones that get done bing, bang, boom, like Dre Greenlaw a few years ago and like Deommodore Lenoir.
Lenoir.
Right? So, like, yeah, it's a very weird But again, Niners kick the field goal. They stop Green Bay, but then the offense stalls. They stop Green Bay again, and then Niners get the ball back. They fumble the ball on the 15-yard line, turn the ball over. Green Bay scores. Niners get the ball again. Christian McCaffrey has a long catch and run for 23 yards, fumbles the ball. Packers get the ball back, score a touchdown again. I mean, it was just the defense just couldn't hold up after all those opportunities of getting the ball in a short field. And that's how you get the third worst loss in the Kyle Shanahan era, 38-10.
Yeah, you summarized that perfectly. The way it happened, it felt like those 3 possessions, and I'm glad we touched on them because those 3 possessions, it felt like just took everything from this team. It felt like it took everything out of the defense, took everything that was left out of the offense. Again, I didn't even feel like they gave themselves a chance to win in this game with Brandon Allen. And I didn't feel like Brandon Allen even took the game away from them. It would be one thing for us, Rob, to come away from this game Nick Mullins style with the 49ers, where it's like, damn, Brandon Allen just wasn't freaking good enough. He just missed too many throws. He threw too many picks. But I didn't feel like that in this game. In fact, I felt like, had they given Allen more opportunities, he was making throws. He was giving them a chance to play in this game. And they couldn't even play well enough around him. That's a damn shame. That's a damn shame on Deebo Samuel. It's a damn shame for Juwan Jennings. It's a damn shame for George Kittle. It's a damn shame for Fred Warner. It's a damn shame from them as an entire football team. They didn't even give them a chance. They didn't even give themselves a chance to compete. And when they did, they made mistakes that
they failed.
They don't make the plays. They don't execute in a game that would make you think that they're a old, aging veteran team that's been to 4 out of 5 NFC championship games, right? If this was the Chiefs, for example, and I know the Chiefs are the champions, right? But a team that's experienced, a team that's well-versed, right? Rob, if they're able to hang around and it's 17-7 or 17-10 in that second quarter and Jordan Love throws a lollipop, they flip the momentum of the game. Just like that there. And if their defense gets a stop, their offense capitalizes. Their offense has sucked this year. But watch what their offense does off turnovers. They watch the 49ers game. Perfect example. Yep. They seize the moments of football games. They are good situationally because they have won so many football games together. I don't get that impression from a team that's been 4 out of 5 NFC championship games that they can execute down the stretch together. And the guys that don't execute, Rob, are the guys that are supposed to be the 49ers studs. They're supposed to be the guys that are situationally aware. So if those guys don't execute, what am I supposed to do about Renardo Green as a rookie? How's he supposed to know? They don't play winning football.
One thing about the Chiefs that's been remarkably rare, and I'm not trying to excuse their success because they've earned everything they've gotten. They're better than the 49ers in every way. But they have not had the brain drain of coordinators and coaches that the 49ers have. Steve Spagnuolo's been there since 2019. Andy Reid, of course, has been there since before 2019. Like, you've had your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator, and they have been there.
It happened more with Alex Smith than it happened with Mahomes.
Yes.
Because the offensive staff got drained with Alex Smith, but the entire offensive staff has stuck around with Mahomes more or less.
And it's Andy Reid. I mean, Andy Reid is the driver of, that's the benefit of having an offensive head coach. But that is not nothing. And again, I'm not excusing the losses by the 49ers, and I'm not diminishing what the Chiefs have done. But to ignore that is crazy. They've had the best offensive mind of his generation and the best defensive coordinator maybe of all time. And he's been there for
They went and hired him, though. He was available. They fired Bob Sutton and went and hired him. Yeah.
To their credit, 100%.
And the one thing I'll say for a team that had the quarterback, they went and hired him, and then they went and drafted for him, right? They went and got corners that he wanted. They went and spent money on Tyrann Mathieu. They went and spent money on Justin Reed. They obviously have one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history, too. That helps so much, right? Chris Jones is dominant. But you're absolutely right. It is a unique thing for the Chiefs to have been this good, but still have essentially Reid, Spagnuolo maintain status quo, because Spagnuolo is never going to get a head coaching job at this point.
Right. And even the Patriots with Brady, they lost Bill O'Brien. They lost Josh McDaniels.
Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel.
There was
Genius.
Yes, there was a brain drain on that staff. And to the Patriots' credit, they were able to keep the wheels, going. The 49ers have had that, and Kyle has done some good things with replacing some of the coaches, but it's hard to keep doing that year after year. And to dismiss that as a reason for the Chiefs' success, I think would be inaccurate.
Yeah, and in some ways, I kind of question it with the Niners too, of like how good are the coaches coming up, right? Like Leonard Hankerson, for example. This receiving room, these receivers are kind of sloppy. They're kind of indisciplined. We knew Wes Welker kept Deebo in shape, right? I was watching 2021 highlights of Deebo. Deebo had a 34 waist in 2021. Okay. Um, we knew Wes Welker took him on those long runs. When Deebo would have been a rookie, Leonard Hankerson would have come on as a QC and stuff like that. So maybe him and Deebo don't have the same relationship him and Wes Welker had. I don't know. But some of these things also, right, like you talked about, like the next coach they have coming up in the pipeline, we don't necessarily question it, but this is a really sloppy football team, Rob. They don't execute the way we would expect a team to that's coached by Kyle Shanahan. I'll say that. Like they hurt themselves way too much for a team that's expected to be extremely well coached.
So now the question is, do you think that so all the people that want to fire Kyle Shanahan are sitting there saying he never changes, he never will change? I don't agree that he never changes. I do think he's evolved the offensive system, but the question is, will he make any big changes with his own game planning? One of the questions I tried to ask on the conference call today, and it was a long conference call because a lot of people had questions, and I tried to ask it, but people were also asking questions, and so he couldn't hear it. But one of the questions I wanted to ask him was, how much responsibility do you bear for the play of the team this season? Do you think if they miss the playoffs that Kyle will in a quiet place when he's just him and himself, will he say, I've got to be better in X, Y, and Z areas? Or do you think he's going to say, it's everybody else's fault, I did everything right?
I think it's going to be somewhere in between both, Rob. Like realistically, like if think about this, if we were Kyle Shanahan, right? And let's take the all encompassing that we're Kyle Shanahan. He's been in this business for 20 plus years. Put his life into this business. Okay. So, first, starting off with some of the conversation and some of the analysis done on him, it's done from a place of, you know why it's so bad? You know why the analysis is so bad? Because there's no empathy for what he's going through. Oh, Kyle Shanahan needs to be fired. Kyle Shanahan looks like he doesn't care. Like, what are you talking about? Imagine yourself going through a tough situation in your job. Would someone say you don't care? Would that be the first thing someone says about you? Okay, that's horrible analysis. So I agree with you. That's not the case with him. But in terms of like what he does well and him reflecting, I think he changes. I think he changes in small ways, but he's made it this far and he's been this successful having strong convictions philosophically in what he believes in. And what he believes in has gotten the 49ers this far. I don't know that you necessarily want to change all aspects of that. You want to evolve it. You want to make it better. And so I think he will look to evolve. But for me, this is where I think the 49ers need an extra voice in there, Rob. I think they need somebody who sees it a little bit different. Maybe somebody who sees it from the analytics, someone who sees it from the logic. I think there's too much same brain syndrome in the 49ers front office, and that same brain syndrome doesn't question Kyle Shanahan on certain moves enough. Like, Kyle, I get it. You saw Javon Hargrave kick ass versus you in 2021 week 2. But should we really go pay him $84 million? Because he's not been an $84 million defensive tackle. Kyle, I get it. Quan Alexander, he had a family situation. His heart was on the line. He kicked butt versus you in the Georgia Dome. But maybe we shouldn't pay him all that money because he's not that good of a linebacker. And there's examples like this where he falls in love with certain things in certain situations, and there is no fiscal responsibility that follows through. And it feels like nobody questions him. Nobody questions him about paying Jet McKinnon. Hey, Kyle, nobody in the history of the NFL has traded 3 ones a month before the draft without knowing what quarterback that we're going to take. This is odd. Let's not do this. Like,
Well,
there needs to...
Sorry to cut you off. Not only that, they traded the picks, and then they tried to get Aaron Rodgers after that.
Right, because he didn't know what he was doing. And that's where, to me, you need a logical thinker, an organizational thinker, someone who comes in and also says, hey, Kyle, this is how you're managing. Sit him down, Kyle. This is how you're managing games currently. You go for it on 4th down based on field. But I'm not going to lie to you. Your 4th down decision-making sucks. It's horrible because you're not having a real feel for what's going on with this game. Let's come up with a real plan organizationally, something you believe in, something we believe in, the team believes in, on how we're going to handle these sort of things. I think that's the next step for the 49ers. I'm not saying that guy needs to be above Kyle Shanahan. I'm not saying they need to come and remove Kyle Shanahan or check him, but there needs to be a different point of view in this front office because there's too much same style thinking. And for me, this offseason, someone should have come in and asked the question of why are we running this back again with this same roster? It's old. Should we not reload a little bit? I don't think they do enough of that around Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, so this is the interesting thing. And, I like that we're having this conversation because I feel like this is a little more nuanced than fire Kyle, don't fire Kyle. Part of the reason that I think that they were able to build up the roster the way that they did is because of the exact thing that's now a problem. Like they had a unified, focused idea on the kinds of players they wanted, right? They wanted football psychos. They wanted physical players. They wanted guys that had specific skill sets that Kyle could put in certain positions and maximize. And it worked. They went from a garbage roster to an incredible roster. But maybe that's Kyle's area of skill. And what he's not good at is managing things once you have the built up roster, because that's a separate skill, right?
Who you pay, who you don't pay.
Yes, all of that stuff. So is Kyle just better at the building it up stage and not as good as the managing, once you've got it stage?
I think you nailed it because I think he's good at the coaching aspect. The building up is I have this player. How can I maximize his skill sets, right? That's why they're so good with these late round picks. Because these late round picks are players who have very specific skill sets. They're drafted in the 6th round because they can do 1 or 2 things that might be valuable in the league. They could do 8, they would be a 1st round pick. That's just the name of the game. It's very rare you get like a George Kittle type talent in the 5th round, right? You're dealing with players who have curated skill sets, and Shanahan takes those skill sets, puts them in a system that maximizes it. They get reps, they get confidence, and they become really good players. That coaching element in the 49ers is awesome. They draft, they develop, they do those things very well from a coaching standpoint. The second part, which you touched on, right, which is the paying and the managing, I think that's just the lack of organization in his head. And I think the best of Kyle is that he's into football. He loves football. He loves the strategy. He's willing to try things. He's creative. That sort of genius needs a level of organization, a level of critical thinking, a level of logic to cut through it. And I think that's really what's missing in the 49ers organization. I've been talking about the word value for a long time. Like their value system doesn't make sense. And they've built a great roster in spite of that, right? And we've seen examples of it. Why are you negotiating with the guy for 4 months if you were going to pay him anyway, right? Why are you negotiating with him for 4 months? It just doesn't logically make sense. To me, that's not Shanahan's forte. That's not his job. That's not what he's been around. That's ultimately what screwed his dad in Denver. His dad had too much control as the GM and the coach, and he couldn't do both, and it got him fired. Again, it's not a disrespect either to John Lynch, Rob, but
his dad also won 2 Super Bowls in Denver, too.
Right, immediately off the bat. And he was there for 10, 12 years, right? Not the same thing. But I just keep coming back to, Rob, like for me, they need a logical thinker. They need somebody who looks at it from an analytics point of view. They make too many decisions for me to be confident that they don't have somebody that looks at it like that.
Well, and we talk about the brain drain, right? I mean, they had Adam Peters there. They had Rand Carthon there. They had, who's the other one I'm forgetting? In the front office, Martin Mayhew. Like they had guys and they have lost those guys. And who have they replaced them with? Kind of nobody.
But that's the problem, right? I don't think they replaced them because I don't think they were looking for stronger points of view away from the coach and maybe John Lynch. And I think John Lynch does his role well, but I think his role is to enable the wants and needs of Kyle Shanahan, not necessarily check them. I think the only person that really checks them is his dad.
I think that John's good at the massaging. Like,
right.
So for example, I don't know that this happened, but this is just me trying to connect the dots. All right. You've got Peters and Mayhew and Rand Carthon there. You've got that sort of brain trust, and they want to do one thing and Kyle wants to do the other. And I think Lynch was the guy that sort of played mediator and sort of kind of, made things.
But ultimately, what do you think they did, Rob? What was his mediation? Making sure what Kyle wanted happened, right?
If
That's why they hired this sort of GM instead of a Gutekunst.
But here's the thing. I think if Kyle pounded the table, Kyle got what he wanted. But I think that Lynch, I bet you, and I could be totally wrong here. This is irresponsible speculation, but I bet you there were times where Lynch was able to talk Kyle down and stop him from pounding the table and maybe acquiesce to some of what the front office was telling him.
It's hard to say, right? Because they won't give us those examples, but we have plenty of examples year after year where it shouldn't have happened. Joe Williams, man. And I know you brought up Wes Richburg early in the show. The guy had 5 concussions with the Giants. Paying him that sort of money was irresponsible. The guy had, I know concussions isn't ultimately what ruined his career with the 49ers, but him being a talented player was never the issue. Jet McKinnon, what sort of money was that for Jet McKinnon?
Yeah, but Jet McKinnon also tore his ACL on the last play of the last preseason practice.
Right. But come on. They paid Jet McKinnon, who at the time hadn't accomplished much like Jet McKinnon was going to be Christian McCaffrey.
They did pay him a lot of money, and they were certainly selling that they had this whole plan for him, and who knows if it would have worked out. But there was a significant injury there that you have to at least.
Right. I agree. But I'm just saying, like, financially, these are just certain decisions that you can see comes more from an emotional coach than financially savvy executive, if that makes sense. And the quarterback decision, trading up for a Joe Williams, a Dante Pettis, going and getting him 10 picks, going up 10 picks to go get him. Even the Brandon Ayuk one, Rob, like, it's not that Ayuk isn't a great player. He ultimately got a contract. All of those things are good. But if you think about the logic of it, the 49ers went up 5 picks to trade up for the 5th best receiver in the greatest receiver draft of all time. And if you think about it, do they need to go 5 picks to get Ayuk? When you look at T. Higgins, who was drafted at 32 and stuff like that, it's not Ayuk isn't a good player. It's just the logical thinking. Does it make sense? Is this how we're going to utilize our resources? I think it's missing from the 49ers. And I have a feeling that it's because of Kyle Shanahan, because I don't find there to be any logic to how he manages games, Rob. And I don't know that that's always the worst thing, because sometimes, occasionally, his feel can be good. But I think instinctually, no other coach is doing that, Rob. I don't even see the Harbaughs, who are like the most like old school football guys you'll ever find. Those guys are analytically embraced.
I think he does embrace some of the analytics, not all of the analytics. I think he doesn't.
He doesn't embrace logic to his decision making. That's my issue. I don't care if it's analytics. I don't care if it's football. Be consistent. He's not.
Well, here's the thing. Kyle's been in football his whole life. He obviously has relationships with people around the league. I'm sure if he wanted to, he knows multiple front office people that he could reach out to. Do you think that they do make a move in that area, or do you think that it is doomed, that he is locked?
It's not his job, in my opinion, Rob. It's the owner's job. This is where, like, you're the CEO.
That's never going to happen.
You got it. But that's the problem for me with the 49ers. Like, this is where, if you're Jed York, like, your job in this situation, like, yes, like, lucking into hiring Kyle Shanahan, like, yeah, you went from being the worst owner, the idiot who hired Jim Tomsula, the idiot who hired Chip Kelly, the idiot who hired Mike Singletary before the season even ended, to now, yeah, you're now a good owner, apparently. Okay, fine. He's a good owner now. Okay. Now that you're a good owner, like, your job is to get the best out of Kyle Shanahan, right? Like, you've gotten a good coach. He's not, it's like the way Shanahan describes top 5 quarterbacks. I think it's a good way to describe coaches. You just want a guy who you feel like can give you a chance to be top 5 every year. He'll have some years where he's top 3. He'll have some years where he's top 10. Shanahan is certainly having a top down year as a coach, but I think we can all agree he's one of those high ceiling coaches that can be one of the best 2-3 coaches in the NFL. So you have one of those guys. You don't want to get him out of the building. How do you maximize doing your best with him? How do you help him? How do you get him to be better? That's Jed York's job. This is his job. His job is to do this for the 49ers. That's why he's the CEO.
You're not wrong, but Jed just wants to be at the cool kids table, man. Jed, first of all,
that's the problem.
Jed, I agree. Jed's never going to talk to Kyle that way, and Kyle's never going to allow Jed to talk to that way. You can tell with the utter disdain that Kyle has for the media. He is not here to listen about football to anybody that's not in the game, in the trenches. And even those guys he doesn't listen to unless you have every single answer from what we've been.
But if their relationship is as strong as they say, Rob, they should be able to finagle this situation without it being an issue. I'm not saying go create a divisive situation, right? A lot of people are going to hear what I'm saying and be like, well, Jed York had that when he had Trent Baalke and Jim Harbaugh got along. I'm not even saying bring someone above Kyle Shanahan. I'm saying they need to add a thought process to this brain trust that brings a level of logic that cuts through and balances this stuff out. And to me, if they have that strong of a relationship, Jed York should be able to sit Kyle in a room and say, hey, Kyle, I love you. You're a great coach. You've done a lot for the 49ers. We don't want to fire you. We don't want to lose you. But we feel like you're consistently falling short in these areas, and this is how we want to help you and help the 49ers become better in this area. What do you think? Have an open discourse. Help him. But going into the offseason, just letting Shanahan do whatever he wants with this football team because you're Jed York and you're beholden to Kyle Shanahan because before him you were nothing and after him you're probably going to be nothing, so you're just sticking with Kyle Shanahan. It's not a solution, and I think that's the biggest issue with this team. What is his credentials to run a football team, run a business?
Lynch is the one that has to do that. Jed is not that guy.
But Kyle is more powerful than Lynch. That's the problem.
I know, but Kyle won't listen to Jed. Even though Jed has the power,
then
Kyle will...
What is Jed doing owning this football team? If the coach won't listen to the owner, then we got an issue, Rob.
Well, no shit. Jed York sucks as an owner. This just in. Like, that's not breaking news. To be fair, though, I do wonder, did Kyle try and do that this offseason, Vish? Because what did he do? He went to Bill Belichick and said, I'll let you do whatever you want to do. Just come be a part of the organization. That's a thing that happened. And Belichick turned him down. So maybe that gives us hope. Maybe Kyle did recognize, hey, I could use some advice.
Rob, I'm not giving the guy credit for recognizing that he could be helped by the greatest strategic mind in the history of the sport. Like, oh, real humility, Kyle Shanahan. You think Bill Belichick can help you?
Oh, but if Kyle was
I'm making a joke of it. I got it. I'm sorry.
If Kyle was this stubborn jerk that everybody says, he wouldn't have done that. And he did it. The problem is finding somebody who Kyle respects in that way. And I don't think there are many of those people. That's the tricky part.
Yeah, but I think it's important to be able to do that because they do need some help in that regard. And where I come to it is I feel like at the end of the day, dude, like I think he's got too much on his plate. And I think certain decisions, yeah.
Tim B says Saleh turned Kyle down. He just helped the Packers win. Did Kyle actually reach out to Saleh about joining the team? I know he reached out to him after he was fired. I don't know if it ever came out that he specifically said, hey, would you come back? I don't know.
The issue with the defense is personnel, man.
Right. And I don't know if Sorensen's a good DC, but comparing him to Wilkes straight up and being like, Wilkes was better. It's like, it's not the same defense. The players are different, man. They had multiple first-round picks on the defensive line with Steve Wilkes was there. This
Wilkes had way more than Sorensen for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So I don't think it's fair. Again, I don't know that Nick Sorensen is a great defensive coordinator, but just comparing those two is not an intellectual, honest exercise.
Right. The indictment of Sorensen to me is the fact that they didn't want to hire him this offseason.
Right.
You just touched on it with the Belichick, this, that. Like they were trying to hire everyone. Right. And then you nailed it. Rob, pat yourself on the back. What did you say as soon as Brandon Staley got here?
He's the real DC.
Right.
And I don't know that he is or it. Like they didn't trust Sorensen to do it on his own. When D'Amico was there, it was D'Amico's show. Kyle loved D'Amico Ryans from the second he was hired. Did he even interview anybody else? I don't even know that he interviewed anybody else when they hired D'Amico Ryans. I think they just hired him.
I think they might have talked to Raheem Morris too.
Did they?
Because the Rams hired Raheem Morris that cycle.
I don't remember. If they did, I could be wrong about that. But
yeah, I mean, it was more like you said. Maybe they talked to someone. It was moot. They were just crossing their T's and dotting their I's before hiring D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah. This Sorensen was the fourth option. Now, it's not Kyle's fault. It's not like he was firing defensive coordinators left, right, and center. Robert Saleh got hired away. D'Amico Ryans got a promotion. He got a better job. Like,
it's elements of it though, right? Because it's like Sorensen, you're coming in as the defensive coordinator, but you don't touch the defensive line scheme, right? They pay $1 million to a guy to do that. What's going on? When's the last time the 49ers have developed a defensive lineman? A young guy has emerged. A young guy is giving them something. Who's improved this year, Rob?
All right, they whiffed on Kinlaw. They whiffed on Drake Jackson. They had to trade for Randy Gregory. They had to trade for Trace Young.
They didn't get a lot out of Randy Gregory. Was a biscuit when he was here. They weren't getting Chase Young to play the best football of Chase Young's career. They don't have the culture that they had, Rob. They don't have the culture that they had.
So the question is, how much changes this offseason? How willing are they to make changes? And that'll be a big test. And it'll be very telling what they do or what they don't do this offseason. I kind of thought that we were reaching a point where 49ers offseasons would just sort of settle down. Stupid me, man. What an idiot I am. This offseason could be the most explosive offseason yet, because you've got the tearing down of this team. Who knows what the hell happens with Brock Purdy? If Brock Purdy is hurt again and coming off another major surgery, all of a sudden we're back in the quarterback pool. They got a whole cabinet full of draft picks they could do all sorts of crazy shit with. Who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. I will say, dude, right now, the Brandon Ayuk contract doesn't look too great. And it's unfortunate because of the injury, right?
It's not their fault. Yeah. I mean,
I think it is their fault in one way, Rob. Even without the injury, I feel like you look at the rest of this roster and you feel like that $30 million could be allocated to line help on both sides because they're not hurting too bad at receiver without him. And even if Deebo walked, they would be able to get somebody for a mid-level contract like a Curtis Samuel to come fill a role. Like the Jennings-Pearsall situation doesn't look too bad, right? So why did you wait 4 months to pay this guy 30-something million now?
Well, how they handled the Ayuk contract was bizarre, crazy, and ridiculous. The signing of Brandon Ayuk to an extension, I get. And then, unfortunately, if he hadn't gotten hurt, Vish, I don't think I would have any complaints about the Ayuk.
I think I still would, because I feel like Pearsall has looked like he's got a little bit of something, right? And then Jennings has been shown to, and they re-signed Jennings too, which was a great re-signing, by the way. So they have him for another year, but he's shown to be a good receiver as well. So like you said, why did they wait 4 months? And it was bizarre how they handled it, but that's where waiting 4 months to me, that money could be distributed to other positions because they do have decent talent at receiver. If they got the contract done in May, then maybe they draft Braden Frisk at 31. Now even with the Ayuk injury, I look at it and say they still needed their receiver. They're pretty okay at receiver. They're missing major depth in other spots, and they need money and resources to be able to go get players at those spots, and they don't have that.
Stephen Draper says the culture went away when they got rid of the true captains on the team. Jimmy Ward, DeForest Buckner, Armstead, and also Azeez Al-Shire. I mean, they made a Super Bowl after getting rid of DeForest Buckner.
Yeah, I think Armstead is one we can say for sure. I think there's an accountability on defense that maybe we can attribute to Eric Armstead now.
I don't know. Maybe. By all accounts, he was an awesome dude, awesome teammate, awesome locker room guy, a guy that survived multiple head coaches, which is very rare.
My favorite indication of how good a player is.
Everybody that came in there was like, that guy needs to be a part of this team. That's not nothing.
Right. And he had to do it in different ways. He dropped 20 pounds and tried playing Leo the first time when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch first came. Then he put the pounds back and played the big defensive end. Then he played defensive tackle.
At a really high level, he played defensive tackle.
Yeah, he was a good player. He was a very good player. But it's just... maybe it's him, Rob. Maybe they're not getting it, but Bosa, Warner, I expect more.
Bosa's so frustrating because he can play so well at times, and then there are so many times when he's how many times have we seen Nick Bosa drop back, get pressure, just miss a sack, and it's a completion? way
he feels
too
like
many
a contractor, right? That's the thing I think that feels frustrating to fans. They don't want to say it, but I think if we had to verbalize what feels frustrating about him is that it's not that he's a great player. It feels like he's there as a mercenary to do his job. He doesn't feel like he bleeds the red and gold the way an 85 seems to bleed the red and gold.
But I think that's a Bosa thing. I think the
yeah,
Bosa,
100%. But I think that also plays into the feeling that fans get when they watch him on a play in and play out basis, because he's really good at using his energy at certain points. He's really good at playing the game to maximize his performance throughout the game. But fans watch like a TJ Watt who is culturally Steelers. You know what I mean? He's like, if you say Steelers, like you're talking from generations of cultures, TJ Watt represents that, and they want Bosa to be that sort of guy, like representing 49er, bleeding 49er, being Mr. 49er. And I don't think he's that guy. And I think he's very hesitant to become that sort of guy.
The Steelers went from Palomalu to TJ Watt.
Right. And they had James Harrison in between too.
Yeah, well,
with Joey Porter before that.
With Palomalu. Like that.
Right.
I mean,
how good does it get?
My goodness. Yeah, there's holes. They need to fix them. There are problems. They need to address them. Kyle Shanahan said today they know that they have to win every single game.
We know what we got ahead of us. We know exactly what that playoff situation is. But really all that matters is this week. When you do need to go on a run and put a lot of wins to even think of that, then you better make sure you're only thinking of one thing, and that's Buffalo. And so we've had to take care of a lot of stuff today. Hoping the guys will take care of their body stuff here over the day and a half they're away from us, and we'll come back Wednesday fully understanding the situation we're in and coming back ready to fight, because that's all we can do right now is just fight our asses off. And I'll be very surprised that not every guy in this building, when I see them Wednesday, isn't ready for that exact mindset that we're going to need to pull off what we feel we can.
You can't, Kyle. And he doesn't have to say it publicly. I get it. But you got to acknowledge it by what you do in the offseason. Acknowledge the problems of this year by how you address the team in the offseason.
I think that's a great way to put it. And honestly, I'll save it maybe for a different show, because the 49ers season is still really alive, and we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're chasing two other teams.
This division just sucks. I think that's the one saving grace.
They're a game out, but you're chasing three teams. So you could say you're a game out, but you're not really a game out because you got none of the tiebreakers. And
I guess when we say the other teams suck, we got to say the 49ers suck too, because they lost all three of them.
It's a mid-off. Okay? So
we've come full circle.
At least we have that. Like, technically, there's something to watch for, which is good. We'll see. We will see. But I think we did a good job of breaking it down. I like where we got to with Kyle Shanahan. I think that's a really interesting, different discussion that nobody else has had. So I'm glad we did it. That's why I like to talk to you and do shows with you, because I feel like we get to some new and different places if people stick around long enough. And
what would you ultimately do?
What do you mean? Oh, I'm not firing Kyle Shanahan if they lose every game.
I think that's a given, right? Like, I don't think we're having the conversation from that standpoint. But for me, like, I'm suggesting a pretty vague thing, right? Bring in someone new. I don't know exactly who that is. Make sure he works with Kyle Office. I'm putting pressure on the owner to be able to do what I think is his job description. Are you on the same page with me? Or do you feel like there's more fundamental issues? Or do you feel like they just got to put Kyle in a dark room, give him some ayahuasca, have him talk to Aaron, and hope that he self-reflects and comes back a new human?
Aaron may be the quarterback of this team next year. I wouldn't rule out that possibility either. I would like to see some additions to the changes. I would like to see some coaching staff changes besides defensive coordinator. I want to see a new offensive line coach, something to indicate that we need to get some new blood in here. I would like to see that. Honestly, like, they need to stay healthier, which is somewhat out of his control. But I agree with you. Like, I think he can coach guys really, really well. I just don't know if I think I agree with you. I think the team builder Kyle Shanahan is better at building it up than he is at managing the point where they are now. And maybe they need to just tear it down and get back to that point where you're back in Kyle's happy zone. I don't know. But
that's what I thought they would do this year. Because the other thing is he looks burnt out, right? And I thought McVay reached a point when the Rams were overinvested of trading all of their first round picks for star players, putting this pressure on themselves to win. And there were a lot of good articles about McVay falling back in love with football last year when the Rams had this underdog young team and they built up all these young, hungry players and got them to play better over the course of the year. And it felt like to him, he was coaching them again. For me, that was my suggestion with the 49ers this year as well. I thought it would bring exactly what you just described, some passion to Kyle Shanahan, what he does best, getting these young players, utilizing them, getting them to learn, getting them to grow. To me, Kyle Shanahan's a teacher. Kyle Shanahan's a lifelong coach. Kyle Shanahan's a lifelong football coach. I thought that those would be all of those things. But like you said, and I also said, I feel like the team builder, his inability to understand logically the whole situation because he's never worn that hat. He's always coached the football team, and that's what he should know, and that's where his expertise are, is what's hurting that from happening. Which of the big dudes would you get rid of before we get out of here? We know two of them, but who are the other ones?
Deebo gone, Juice gone, Hargrave gone for sure. Just book it. Don't even think about it. I don't need to talk to them. It's not a will you take less money. It's a you're done. You're out of here. I mean, you're not going to move Ayuk. You're not going to move off Christian. If someone would take Christian McCaffrey, I'd consider it. Trent Williams, they can't replace him. He may retire, but
I don't think they can move him too. He might not want to play anywhere else.
Rendell's got to go. Colton McKivitz has got to go. He's got to go. Handing this guy this job for no. So that's got to change. Dre Greenlaw is a tricky one because I love the guy and he adds an element of juice and fire and passion and all that stuff, but he's coming off an Achilles injury, and those are crippling to explosive guys. And part of Greenlaw's allure and what made him special was his range, was his speed. I don't know that any of that is still going to be there. So they're opening his practice window this week, which is good. It'd be a nice little chance to get to see what he looks like. And, he's not going to be 100%, of course, but that I would want to see play out. I would not pay Brock Purdy a penny this offseason if he needs any kind of surgery. Any kind of surgery on that throwing arm, you don't get a dime from this organization, Brock Purdy. And if you want to hold out, great. You hold out coming off 2 surgeries. We'll figure it out, dude. I'm not paying Brock Purdy if he has to have surgery. If he doesn't have to have surgery, maybe we can talk about, a short-term contract. We can buy out your franchise tag years with like a $30 million. Maybe. I don't know that he would go for that, though, to be honest with you. But I think that's where I am. Hufanga's a free agent. He can leave, too. That's totally fine. Obviously, Mooney Ward, you can't pay Mooney Ward given where he is in his career. All off-field issues aside. And you got to find a third cornerback, like you said. You've got to find a linebacker that can go opposite. If it's D. Winters, great. But figure out who that guy next to Fred Warner is going to be. And it can't be Devondre Broke-ass Campbell.
Agreed. And the one thing I want to mention is you listed a ton of positions that they need to fill. And it sounds like a lot, but really, and you and I talked about this on the phone, and I'll be brief, like they can reload some of these positions quickly. Like they don't need to find the best player in the world. For me, I think what I want to see is just young, hungry players. So maybe a little bit more competition. I don't want 34-year-old Devondre Campbell coming in and getting a starting job because you have pressure to win and you want to have a guy that you can believe in. I want to ride it out and see what I got between Flanagan Fowles, who has stuck around for 5 years. Is he a real football player? Let's find out. D. Winters, I want to see if one of these guys is a future starter. Okay, cornerback, I don't want to find out between Isaac Yiadom, who stunk in multiple places, and Rock Ya-Sin, who stunk in multiple places. I want to find out between Darrell Luter and, Ambry Thomas, who stuck around for 4 or 5 years. Like, which one of those guys is going to be able to contribute? I know both of those guys are an IR in this case. It's just an example of, hey, let's have these young, hungry players, and maybe some of them will suck, but let's find out what you got in them and see if you can, have some younger, more talented, hungrier players in a lot of these positions. But I don't want another offseason where they sign 32-year-old Leonard Floyd. and that's a solution. Or they sign 34-year-old or 33-year-old Devondre Campbell, or whatever his age is, or 27-year-old Malik Collins. Like, I think this team has an opportunity to get young and rebuild and reload. And who's really their future culture, right? Like, we know this core of Kittle, Williams, McCaffrey. You mentioned all of them. The real main ones are Kittle, right? He's been the longstanding 49er. Other than Demo Lenore, who is that part of that future? We know Bosa is. We think Purdy is. Brandon Ayuk is supposed to be, but now the injury puts that into question.
Pearsall.
We can't say that yet, but you're right. Like, the first round pick is with the intention for him to be there.
Exactly.
So they need to also find those future young pieces and start building around them and building towards them. The Rams had a similar,
Who's the core of this team going forward? This could be I said it's a transitional year. Once you realize,
found out, Rob, they could have found out.
Well, and they got lucky in that their draft class appears to be so solid that they got a good head start.
Right. And it's also, I will say, like, it was a low pressure draft class because it wasn't like they were taking a left tackle and an edge rusher and a defensive tackle. They were trying to hit on a safety and a right guard and, hey, a running back. And they hit on it. Like, they hit on those positions, a couple receivers, no doubt about it. You talked about it. They killed the draft class. But I do think, there's going to be a little bit more pressure. And the Rams have gotten a head start on it, right? Like, similar roster arc. They built it up. They were a year before the 49ers. They went to the Super Bowl first in 18, the Niners in 19. They've gotten a head start with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner. Like, those are young ascending players that it looks like they can build another real defense around. Where are those guys for the Niners?
They still got Bosa. They still got Warner, who are still on the back end of their prime. So they're not totally starting from scratch on defense. This
Mustafa looks like he's something.
2025 draft is going to be incredibly important. Where do they go? Where do they put their resources? What do they do? And hopefully we're all back in 2025 and we're talking about, a reload situation where we see that hunger. But I think you said it. That's the biggest thing. Give me the hunger back. Give me the guys that just have a burning desire to run through that wall. And we'll see. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get good audio podcasts. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Click the bell to get notified when we're live. If you're new to the show, thank you for joining us. We're live every single weekday. We are live after every Niners game. We're live after all Niners breaking news as well. Trust me, I will put our Niners coverage up against anybody else doing this. Anybody else, regardless of subscriber count, follower count, whatever you want to call it. Give us a chance. You'll see for yourself that we back up what we say. I promise we won't let you down. Vish, it's always illuminating, my friend. You made me a better, smarter fan, as always.
I love doing the show, Rob. You also make me a better, smarter fan and a more emotionally in touch fan.
Like and subscribe to Vish's YouTube channel as well. Search Vish Kumar and it pops right up. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.